Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.net. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll continue now where we left off yesterday in the book The Global Vatican by former U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, Francis Rooney. Chapter 9 of the book we started yesterday, and it's entitled War and Peace. And we'll back up one paragraph for continuity purposes and continue. John the 23rd was everything that the austere, aristocratic Pope Pius XII was not. Born in a rural village in northern Italy, the third of 13 children of a poor farmer, Angelo Roncalli was gregarious and seemingly unsophisticated, despite his considerable erudition. He was also at 27, he was already at 77, already advanced in age. The consensus was that he would be a transitional pope, a congenial caretaker, whom both the reformers and the conservatives in the church would accept at the time. Yesterday I concluded my discussion with the fact that this Hegelian dialectic, as some would refer to it, this two-poled consensus, the left and the right, which we all know exists in politics. We call the liberals or the Democrats the left, and we call the Republicans or the conservatives the right. And that forms the dynamic for which change is implemented. There's this conceivable conflict between the two sides, but in reality, they support a single agenda. That's the advancement of a global papal government, restoring the old world order. That's what the new world order is, the restoration of the old world order on a global scale. You can't advance that much change without conflict, a dynamic to inspire the change. So, as my analogy goes with the grandfather clock, the pendulum, in order to advance the second hand on the clock, must first swing left and then right, and then left and then right. Otherwise, the clock doesn't advance. And same goes for the Roman Catholic Church. And I quote again the Roman Catholic prelate that once said, the Roman Catholic Church in war is far more dynamic than the Roman Catholic Church at peace. So we need the conflict. If there isn't a conflict, there needs to be one made. And in the Roman Catholic Church, there is the same dialectic, the left and the right. And even within the Roman Catholic Church, that apparent conflict serves only to energize the need for change. Okay. I hope that is understandable to most people. So there are the reformers in the Roman Catholic Church who would like to liberalize the church, take down some of the Romanism, if you will, and make Roman Catholicism more appealing to the masses. And then there are the conservatives who are staunch, traditional Roman Catholics. They hold to the Council of Trent, and they don't like change. They don't like the new Mass. They don't like the changes that were made by the papacy during the Second Vatican Council. But those changes were necessary at a time when Rome was advancing her ecumenical movement to reunite or to gather back the Protestant churches back under the authority of the papacy. Rome had to make an attempt to appear to be appeasing and less persecutorial of the so-called separated brethren. And then I described yesterday the arch-conservatives. They are true Roman Catholics, by my estimation, and they believe that every pope since John the 23rd, the pope that we're reading about, the one who succeeded Pope Pius XII, the conservative pope, Pope John the 23rd and every pope since have been quote-unquote liberals. And the traditionalists and the arch-conservatives consider them to be anti-popes. And the reason they are regarded as anti-popes is because they are pro-left, they're pro-ecumenical, they are the ones who rolled out the welcome wagon to the Protestants, who they regard as heretics. The arch-conservatives and most of the traditionalists of the Roman Catholic Church, the conservatives, believe that Protestants are heretics. And the arch-conservatives want to start burning them at the stake again. Okay, obviously more modern means than burning them at the stake, but nonetheless they deserve death. They're not to have any fellowship at all with heretics. So there's the dynamic, and there's a huge difference between the liberals of the Roman Catholic Church and the conservatives, and especially the arch-conservatives, over the nature of these modern popes from John the 23rd through the current Francis I. They're all regarded as heretics, and what the arch-conservatives say is that when Pope John the 23rd, the first liberal pope, and every succeeding liberal pope after him, when they convened Vatican Council II and rolled open the red carpet to heretics, to the Protestants, they offended Mary. Okay? And Mary wants to purify the church, they say. And the arch-conservatives are ready to repudiate completely the papacies of John the 23rd, Pope Paul VI, Pope John Paul I, Pope John Paul II, and Benedict XVI, and now Francis I as antichrist or anti-popes, and repudiate them all. They claim that the chair of Peter has been empty ever since the pontificate of Pope Pius XII. Vatican Council II was a heretical council. Okay, null and void. No more ecumenism, no more fellowship with the heretics. And in order to appease Mary's wrath, they have to make reparations to Mary. They have to, bring forth meat fit for repentance. Bring forth, some action to appease Mary's wrath. Because according to the conservatives, some of the conservatives and most of the arch-conservatives, Mary's very angry because they didn't abide by the terms of the vision of Fatima, and they didn't. And Vatican Council II and liberalism, the last 6 or 7 popes have all been anti-popes. And she wants to clean up the church, restore it to traditional Roman Catholicism, and start burning heretics again. And that's the only way to appease Mary's wrath. And the world is going to go through a time of trouble, not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be, until the Roman Catholic Church does what Mary wants them to do. So, if the traditionalists, the conservatives, and the arch-conservatives begin to sway power over the liberals, then there is going to be an upheaval in the Roman Catholic Church that will translate into relentless persecution against Protestants. I hope I've described this well enough that people can research this for themselves and see that what I'm saying is true. But what we're now talking about, or what this author is talking about, is the pontificate of Pope John the 23rd. He's the one who replaced the conservative friend of the Nazis, Pope Pius XII. Now he says, almost at once, though, John the 23rd shocked the Vatican by proposing an ecumenical council, the first since Pope Pius IX called for one in 1869. Now remember, that was called the First Vatican Council, and that's when power was consolidated into the Pope. The power of the Roman Catholic Church was concentrated into the Pope. Always in history, there was contention between the papacy and the quote-unquote church fathers, the council. And many times they didn't agree, and many times there were war. And oftentimes there might result from this war 2 or 3 concurrent popes. The council would excommunicate a pope or take him off of his chair or run him out of town and then elect another pope. So there would, according to Roman Catholics, be 2 popes at the same time. At one time, there were even 3 popes at the same time because of this continual disagreement between the papacy and the councils. And so the Jesuits, having restored their suppression after Pope Clement XIV disbanded the organization, after the French Revolution, which was to punish those who voted against the Jesuits, got full control of the papacy. And they were restored, and they've run the papacy ever since. Now, John the 23rd and these liberal popes represent Jesuit control. The Jesuits are still running the show. They're running the papacy, unbeknownst to most Roman Catholics. And nearly all Protestants just simply don't know what's going on. But now the Jesuits, seeing the necessity to swing the pendulum from the right to the left, have come up with all these liberal popes. And the last pope, Francis I, the current pope, is a Jesuit himself. The first time in papal history that there was a Jesuit actually on the papal throne. So it's a Jesuit agenda, and it runs counter to the conservatives and the arch-conservatives within the church. So we have this dynamic taking place in the church, this left-right political Hegelian dialectic taking place in the civilian world, and it's all geared toward making a new world order. Now, Pope Pius IX called the First Vatican Council, and that stripped all power from the councils and gave all the power to the papacy. This is how the Jesuits consolidated power and made the Roman Catholic Church easier to control and guide. They didn't have to contend with the councils anymore. They only had to contend with the Pope, and the Pope spoke for the Church, and no one could countermand him. No one could contradict him. And it made running the Church, setting the agenda for the Church much easier. Because the Jesuits only had to control the Pope, and the councils had no authority anymore, or little authority. So that's what happened in Vatican Council I. Now, Vatican Council II, among other things, was to restore traditionalism, in other words, to restate Roman Catholic canon law, and then to, on its face, liberalize the church. They did away with the Latin Mass, or at least gave the bishops or the priests the authority to decide whether the Mass should be conducted in Latin or the vernacular, the language of the people. And it also gave the people in the congregation a little more participation in the Mass, rather than just being conducted rote by the priests. and many more liberal things, but what characterized Vatican Council II more than anything was simply a message to Protestants. And the message was this, and this is the most important component of this entire thing. Listen carefully. Having been preached futurism for the last 200 years in this country, having been taught that the Antichrist is not the papacy, as was believed by all the Protestant reformers, but that the Antichrist of the Bible was one single individual that has not come upon the world scene and will not come upon the world scene until just 7 years before Christ returns. And he will sign a peace treaty with Israel, a 7-year peace treaty that will allow them to build a temple to begin animal sacrifices again. Okay? So, since the Protestants now no longer believe that the papacy is the Antichrist of the Bible, and they believe in a fictitious future man that's going to sign the peace treaty, then the papacy is wholly exonerated. More than that, the Protestant Reformation, which stripped the Pope of his land, stripped the Pope of his kings, stripped the Pope of his temporal authority, stripped the Pope of his spiritual authority, was the gravest assault upon the rightful throne of God on earth. The Protestant Reformation was the greatest crime in all of history because it hindered the papacy. It nearly destroyed the papacy, the very seat of Christ on the earth. And so from Vatican Council II, the ultimatum went forth that since you now believe in a future single individual as the Antichrist who has not arrived on the earth world scene yet, I am exonerated, and the Protestant Reformation was a grievous assault upon heaven, and you must restore all the power that I lost at the Protestant Reformation. You must restore all the land. You must restore all the kings. You must restore all the temporal power. You must restore all the spiritual power. You must come back to the Roman Catholic Church without reservation, or else. Or else. That was the ultimatum that went out to the Protestant churches. Now, it wasn't stated in those terms, but common sense dictates. Common sense dictates that if the Protestants no longer believe the papacy is the Antichrist, then the Protestant Reformation was a crime against God on the earth. And there's no way to undo that except to simply restore everything that the Protestant reformers stripped the papacy of. Common sense absolutely dictates that if you believe in futurism, then I want my earth back. I want my kings back. I want my temporal power back. I want my spiritual power back. And I want to be truly the vicar of Christ on the earth. And that's why the United States was chosen to be the battle axe for the for the restoration of the papacy to global political, spiritual, governmental authority. That's what really occurred at Vatican Council II. Now stop and wrap your brain around that for a minute. If you have an understanding, if you have some knowledge about what the Protestant Reformation meant to the papacy and what it took from him, and after 200 years of being taught futurism, what is the natural demand of the Pope if he truly conceives himself as the vicar of Christ on the earth? You must make reparation. Just like the Roman Catholics are commanded by Mary to make reparation to Mary for having anything to do with the heretics of Vatican Council II. Restoration. What's restoration to the papacy? I've just told you. All the land, all the kings, all the spiritual power, all the temporal power, a global government. I mean, after all, if he's Christ on earth, he ought to be the government. Shouldn't he? He should be the spiritual leader. Every priest and every prelate of the Roman Catholic Church and every Protestant pastor, call himself a Protestant if he wants, he ought to teach whatever God on earth teaches. All right, there's your common sense. There's common sense. The message went forth at Vatican Council II. First, the Jesuits put all the power in the Pope. Then John the 23rd called Vatican Council II, and he put forth the Jesuit ultimatum. Come home to mama, or else. And that or else is going to be the most bloody, the most hideous, the most horrendous persecution ever since the beginning. Rome says it's my way or the highway. Now, while she's putting on this ecumenical face and saying every religion is a viable pathway to God, she maintains her traditional view about Protestantism. You either come back to the Roman Catholic Church or you're toast. That's just the way it is. And our Protestant leaders, many of them comprehended this. And that's why they didn't tell the parishioners, they didn't tell the pew sitters that Vatican Council II was an ultimatum. They just kept preaching futurism. They didn't want to embarrass themselves by saying that futurism is a lie. And they're just leading the Protestants right back into the Catholic Church under the guise of Christian unity, for pity's sake. And not only that, but the Roman Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic prelates of this country, particularly those in control of Washington, D.C., say to themselves, before Vatican Council II, we were just 25% of the population. Before Vatican Council II, there were only Catholics only comprised 24%, 25% of the population of this country. But after Vatican Council II, when we got the Protestants to surrender, the Roman Catholic Church now represents them too. And that means that well over 50%, probably closer to 70 or 75% of the population of this country now is whatever, no matter what name they go by, Baptist, Lutheran, Episcopalian, Seventh-day Adventist, you name it, they're Catholics because they're under the Pope's control. They're under the Pope's spiritual and temporal authority. They capitulated at Vatican Council II. That means a surrender. And when we speak in Washington, D.C., we who once only represented 25% of the population, now we represent 75% of the population. We are a political juggernaut. We are a political mandate. And when we say we want something, by doggies, we better get it. And we better get it quick. A supermajority, that's what the Roman Catholic Church represents now, a political supermajority, just like the supermajority the Roman Catholic Church has on the Supreme Court, and just like the supermajority they have in Congress. And their agenda gets put on the top of the docket, and they get action. They are literally becoming dictators in this country, and you can thank your apostate Protestant pastor for not telling you the truth. We'll be back right after the message. Inquisition update on First Amendment Radio.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Welcome back to the second half of Inquisition Update. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. If you'd like to hear Inquisition Update continue on this network, please support First Amendment Radio, who sponsors the program. If you'd like to contact me directly, please do so by email. My email address is tom@seawaves.us. tom@seawaves.us. Now, I hope my commentary is helping you understand what this author is conveniently leaving out. It's all tied together with futurism. If it weren't for futurism, Vatican Council II could not have happened. If the Protestants still believed that the papacy was the Antichrist, if the Pope wanted to convene an ecumenical council, it would have to be Roman Catholic priests only. No Protestants would ever go to it. Protestants would stand back and protest the Antichrist and all of his bishops and cardinals and priests and prelates and the whole organization. The Pope's the Antichrist. The Roman Catholic Church is the synagogue of Satan. The Roman Catholic Church has no authority whatsoever in our government. This is a Protestant nation, and we're not going to kowtow to the Pope. We answer to Christ and him only, and we're not going to tolerate any more papal tyranny. We overthrew the papacy in the Protestant Reformation, and we're not going back to Rome. Hell no! We're not going back to Rome, and we're not going to let you dictate the civil laws of this country anymore. We're going to abolish your Jesuit bank called the Federal Reserve. We're going to kick all your Catholics off the Supreme Court and put God-fearing, Bible-believing Protestants to interpret the Constitution. We're going to clean house in Washington, D.C. If you're a Catholic and you're sitting in the House chambers or the Senate chambers, pack your bags and be out before dawn. And you Jesuits who run all these Jesuit universities, who have shipped all your perverted people into the most highest places in our government, your schools are going to be closed tomorrow. There's going to be locks thrown on the doors. We're going to confiscate all your records, and we're going to expose to the whole world what you've done in this country for the last 250 years, starting with John Carroll. And then we're going to put you all on a boat and send you adrift and let you be in God's domain then. How's that for a little Protestantism? We're not going to pay your taxes to the IRS to pay for your papal proxy wars. We're not going to kill another living, breathing human being until he hears the gospel of Jesus Christ, and no mass is going to be involved. It's just Christ and him crucified. We're going to give him a King James Bible, and if he rejects that, then he's in God's hands. But you Jesuits will be adrift on the ocean. We'll put you right in God's domain. He can do with you what he will, but you will never set foot on this country again. How's that for a little Protestantism? Huh? It's either that or burn at the stake. Which would you rather have? Would you rather have Christ and him crucified? Or would you rather have Jesuit tyranny? Now, there's not a Protestant voice in this country. Not one that's not shouted down and discredited and made mockery of. So we're going to have Jesuit tyranny. And the sign of that Jesuit tyranny coming upon this country is when the Pope of Rome, the Antichrist of the Bible, Francis I, comes and speaks to a joint session of Congress this fall. And then goes to his global government, the United Nations, and puts forth the same agenda. And what does this bode for Protestants? What few there are. You know, when we're gone, we'll never even be missed. I don't believe a tear will be shed. Not unless God grips the hearts of his people. Reproves them of their futurist error. And grants them grace enough to believe the truth when they hear it for the first time. But don't expect it to come from your Protestant pastor. He's got too much at stake. He's sold that futurism lie all of his life. He's not going to repent. He's not going to embarrass himself by repudiating futurism and returning to the historical understanding of the Protestant reformers. His doom is sealed. He's going to lead you right down the primrose path to perdition. You got one hope. You got to get out of that church. You got to start a house church someplace. You got to get out of the indoctrination. The futurist indoctrination. You need a pauper Protestant pastor. Well, I've said before, go find yourself a soup kitchen someplace and look for the tattered old man standing there with a King James Bible in his arms that just is tattered and torn and worn like a cheap rug. The man has pored over his Bible till he knows it by heart. That's the man you want to preach the gospel in your church. Buy him a hot meal, buy him a clean suit of clothes, put him in the pulpit, behind the pulpit, and sit there and listen. He'll tell you who the Antichrist is. He'll tell you what Vatican Council II was all about. He'll tell you what the New World Order is all about. And he'll introduce to you, probably for the first time, the true Jesus Christ. No more of these Jesuit-trained seminarians. Send them to the soup kitchen. Put a man of God behind the pulpit. The protest is not over. As long as we still have Christ, we have a fighting chance. And if we're not willing to fight the Antichrist, then we'll be his victims. We'll be his slaves. Well, I've been a slave to this papacy long enough. I'm not going back to Rome. And neither should you. Almost at once, though, John the 23rd shocked the Vatican by proposing an ecumenical council, the first since Pius IX called one in 1869. The council, Vatican I, had reinforced orthodoxy. In other words, restated the Council of Trent, which damned heretics to the stake. Damned every tenet of Protestant belief and leveled a curse upon it. Do you realize that Vatican Council, or rather the Council of Trent, was a declaration of all-out war of extermination against Protestantism? That's what it was. That's what it constituted. The Council of Trent, when it says Vatican I had reinforced orthodoxy, it reinforced the Council of Trent. There's your ultimatum of Vatican Council II. Vatican Council II restated the Council of Trent. You either come back to the Roman Catholic Church after you've so wickedly evicted the Pope from his throne, or else the Council of Trent. The all-out war of extermination against Protestantism. That's what the Council of Trent was. If it was nothing else, it was a declaration of all-out war of extermination against Protestantism. I want you to get that through your head. Your pastor's never going to tell you. It was the Jesuit-led bloody Counter-Reformation Council of Trent. It was called to convene a war party against Protestantism, a global war against Protestantism, a war to the death. It was an immediate answer to the Protestant Reformation. Just 30 years later, they convened Vatican Council II. Or rather, the Council of Trent. And when They bought the future. When the Protestants bought the futurist lie, then the ultimatum at Vatican Council II went forward. They restated orthodoxy, the Council of Trent. They declared the threat of all-out war of annihilation against Protestantism if they don't come back to the Roman Catholic Church and repair all the damage that the Protestant Reformation did to the papacy. That's what it means when it says that Vatican Council I had reinforced orthodoxy. And it shored up papal power within the church. It's the shoring up of papal power is what Vatican Council II is all about, both in the church and outside the church. In the Protestant world, it's shoring up the papal power. That's what it's all about. And this author is very candid about it. I'm not putting words in his mouth or meaning. I'm conveying to you the message that this author is trying to convey to you. Vatican Council I had reinforced orthodoxy and shored up papal power within the church. Vatican Council I is where the Pope got full power, unopposable power. They call it papal infallibility. All of that was restated at Vatican Council II. He says this council, Vatican Council II, would do almost exactly the opposite, this author says. It only seemed to do the opposite to get the Protestants to go along with it. Does anybody in their right mind think that the Roman Catholic Church is going to so embarrass itself as to literally perform what they proposed at Vatican Council II? It's a lie. It's a Trojan horse. Rome can't be trusted. The seat of Antichrist is never going to be the seat of Christ. Can a leopard change its spots? Now, the author says Vatican Council II was quite the opposite of Vatican Council I and the Council of Trent. But did you know that at the end of the documents produced after Vatican Council II, to tell the world what happened at that Vatican Council, it stipulates nothing in this council changes anything that took place at Vatican, or rather, the Council of Trent. That's the way Rome restates orthodoxy, even in Vatican Council II, when they threw out the warm welcome to the Protestants. The Protestants got sucked right into the bait. They bought the lie. You can't negotiate with Antichrist. You can either capitulate or die. That has been the entire history of the papacy. Now, he says, while the Second Vatican Council was being prepared in Rome, look what else was going on. Senator John F. Kennedy launched a run for the presidency of the United States. Kennedy was a young, telegenic, and wealthy, all to his benefit. Kennedy was young, telegenic, that is, handsome, good for the cameras, and wealthy, all to his benefit. But he was also Catholic. Heretofore an insurmountable obstacle for a presidential candidate. Why was being a Roman Catholic an insurmountable obstacle for a presidential candidate? Because there was some protest in the country. They knew any Roman Catholic that was in the White House was going to be the servant of the Pope, or he'd be excommunicated from the church and suffer eternal damnation in purgatory. Common sense dictates that, at least to the Protestant mind, the true Protestant mind, not the futurist Protestant mind, every true Protestant understands that if a Roman Catholic succeeds to the White House, he's going to be the Pope's man in Washington. The Pope's going to run the show. And the Protestants were outraged that John F. Kennedy was preparing to run for president. But this was all taking place during Vatican Council II also. Remember, and also that it was at the height of the Cold War. The great boogeyman, communism, which was inspired by the Jesuits, put in place in Russia by the Jesuits, was the big boogeyman to drive all the Protestants back to the Roman Catholic Church. To be a true American, you had to be Catholic, because Catholics were anti-communist. So if you were a Protestant and you wanted to amount to anything in this world, you had to either convert to Roman Catholicism or you had to be openly anti-communist. And you had to fight and die in the anti-communist wars. So-called. Vietnam, Korea, on and on. See how Rome manipulates? Got the Cold War driving the Protestants back toward Rome. You got the president being a Roman Catholic, also an ecumenical president, it looks like. We're uniting Christianity. We're uniting against the communist horde. Vatican Council I is calling Vatican Council II is calling all the Protestants back to the Roman Catholic Church. We're seeing unity among the Christian world. This has got to be God doing this, right? But there were some Protestants in this country. And he said it was an insurmountable obstacle for a presidential candidate if he were Catholic. And said the only Catholic ever to become a serious contender for the presidency was Governor Al Smith of New York, who had been pilloried for his religious beliefs when he ran against Herbert Hoover in 1928. He lost badly, largely due to anti-Catholicism, author, Protestantism. Okay? And fears that Smith would be a puppet of the Pope if he were elected president. That's why Al Smith lost the election miserably, because every Protestant in this land knew that if Al Smith became the president, the Pope would be the president. And Al Smith would be just a puppet on the end of his hand. But after the rise of communism, after the consummation of the ecumenical movement, Vatican Council II is in the works, I think America might even elect a Roman Catholic. And John F. Kennedy's wealthy, and he's good looking. And yes, above all, he's Catholic. And guess what? Protestants went to the polls and voted for John Kennedy. But first, they made John Kennedy go around the country in public speaking engagements to Protestant pastors, assuring them that he didn't speak for the Pope, and the Pope didn't speak for him, and the Pope wouldn't be running the U.S. government. So they went to the polls and elected him. A Roman Catholic. Al Smith was miserably defeated because he was Roman Catholic. John F. Kennedy was elected because he was Roman Catholic. He says 32 years later, John Kennedy would have to overcome what remained of anti-Catholic sentiment in the United States, that is, Protestant sentiment in the United States, not just in the general election, but in his own party's nomination process. Quote, Catholic baiting, unquote, as one conservative stated, is quote, the anti-Semitism of liberals. See, that's what they call you. If you're like Tom Friess, a Protestant, and you protest, they call you a Catholic baiter. they call you a Roman Catholic anti-Semitic, if that's proper. You're a race baiter, too. You hate Catholics. You treat them just like the persecution of the Jews. You've got no legitimate beef against the Roman Catholic Church. It's the throne of Almighty God on the earth. You ought to bow to the Pope and curtsy and all the other, cross yourself and come to Mass and will the church all of your goods when you die. And elect Catholic presidents and Catholic congressmen and Catholic Supreme Court nominees. To a Roman Catholic, to be a Christian is to be Roman Catholic and nothing else. It's intolerant of every other religion despite its public ecumenical face. Its entire history has been intolerance. Does anybody hope that the Roman Catholic Church has changed her ways? Not on your life. And if you try to expose this charade, this ecumenical charade, this attempt at a global government, you're going to be a Catholic baiter. You're going to be an anti-Catholic, anti-Semite. You treat Roman Catholics just like they treated the Jews, just because of our religious faith. They won't tell you anything about the Inquisitions or the Crusades. They won't tell you about the pedophile priests. They won't tell you anything about the Vatican owning the Federal Reserve Bank. They won't tell you that the national debt of this United States, the incalculable national debt of the United States, is owed to the Vatican. They won't tell you that the Vatican picks the nominees for the Supreme Court. They won't tell you that the Vatican makes sure through his prelates in the United States that Catholics go to the highest offices of the land and they write your civil laws to make you conform to Roman Catholic canon law. You have to figure that out for yourself. You can't count on a Protestant pastor to tell you. Because he's not a Protestant anymore. He's an ecumenical evangelibelly. He's repudiated Christ by making league with Antichrist and making you subject to him as well. There's no greater offense that's ever occurred to you in your entire life than what your Protestant pastor's done to you. Better that you should read the Bible and history for yourself than to be spoon-fed lies by a pretty boy behind a pulpit. A filthy, rich, pretty boy. How easily we are deceived. To our shame, to our everlasting shame. Every one of us ought to be on our faces before the Lord, just like Daniel was in Daniel chapter 9. Repenting of his own sins and for the sins of his entire nation. Daniel knew that they were in Babylonian captivity because they'd offended God. And he wept. And he prayed on his face. And you know what? God instantly rewarded him. Just as soon as you went to your knees, God sent the angel to tell you the coming of the Messiah. Do you think God would reward us the same? If we were to all get on our faces and repudiate our futurist lies and accept the truth, admit our error and ask God's grace, do you think he would reward us like he rewarded Daniel? I believe he will. I believe he will. But first must come repentance.